Welcome to the Greenwich Means Business podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Greenwich Means Business podcast. Today we are joined with Keeley Wolley and I will be your host for today, Nataly Vivanco. So Keeley, could you tell us what you do and why you do it?
So I am an intuitive alignment coach, and you're possibly asking what that means. So really effectively, it's being able to help leaders, entrepreneurs and business owners to be able to unlock some of those limiting beliefs, that self-doubt, bring stress down, energy up, and have a clear pathway to what it is that they truly love. Because quite often we fall out of school not quite sure what it is that we truly want to do, and we end up in a career that isn't necessarily what we love. We might be good at it, but it doesn't mean to say we love it. So we're pretty much existing rather than actually living a life that anyone should truly deserve. So absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. And where did you start? Where did it start for you?
So obviously you asked why I do what I do. In 2020, I was strategically made redundant from a company that I'd worked for over 23 years. In fact, it was the first time I'd ever been interviewed at this company in 23 years, which is quite an amazing thing. And I had a successful career. I was an executive leader within that company as well. But going through the process of redundancy was quite a challenge, but also putting my team at risk for redundancy was, it impacted me massively. We was what I can only describe as a family. We worked very closely together, and each time I had to tell someone that I was being made redundant, it just tore me apart. But that also meant that I wasn't concentrating on me. So when it comes to having my interview, I wasn't mentally in the right space for it. I was focusing on everybody else, which we'll touch on is one of my things that I now coach with other people. But when I went through that process and I was officially made redundant, I was given an opportunity for another role, which I didn't take. But the whole process wasn't a positive one. And it led me to effectively crash and burn. I had a huge burnout and mentally and physically shut down pretty much for several months. I wasn't able to talk to my family, my friends. I was signed off sick from work. So the whole situation was not positive. Now, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. I thought it was the redundancy, but it was a final nail in the coffin of a lifetime of things that I shouldn't have been doing that I've since learned because I had to go through my own sort of healing process, like many people would. Why do you get into that position? And as a result of it, I did a lot of inner work, inner study, read lots of books, and effectively I learned to stop. I learned to slow down, and I had lots of time to reset. One of the beautiful things about the COVID period, not many of them, but one of them, was the weather was incredible.
It really was. I remember myself.
Yeah. And it was a great opportunity. And I was privileged, very, very lucky that I had a big back garden. And I was also in a place where I could actually go for a nice long walk. So I walked until the noise in my head stopped and slowed down. And it gave me a chance to reflect on the past. And one of the things that quite often people said is that, the one problem with you, Keeley, is that you always feel responsible for everybody else. You're always taking care of everybody else. In effect, I recognised that I was a people pleaser. But it's great to recognise those things, but you need to understand where that comes from and why that actually happens. Mm-hmm. So in parallel to this, I was actually invited back to the company to be a consultant because they recognised I was the Brexit specialist, and the general management team effectively went, why have you just got rid of the one person that's been managing this for the last 4.5 years? And I was managing it for effectively 27 countries that cross-border trade into the UK. And I had to understand all the customs process, all those kind of things. But why am I saying that is that I went back to them as a consultant, but effectively doing what I was doing before. And because I'd had that time out, that time to stop and slow down, it was almost like, the whole saying is that you can't see the wood from the trees, and it's not until you take a step back you can see a beautiful forest.
Yeah.
And it was when I went back into that environment, doing what I was doing every day, I actually recognised that I didn't really enjoy what it was I was doing because of all the corporate BS that goes on there, the bureaucracy, the procedures, the slow pace of change. I was like, I don't actually really enjoy this. Why am I actually going back doing exactly what I was doing before, which actually calls me, part of it calls me to actually being burnt out. But what I did recognise was the things that I love was all of the training and the coaching, seeing that light shine in someone's eyes when they have that eureka moment, seeing people thrive, seeing them grow, and just seeing that sort of passion, seeing people elevate in their careers.
Yeah.
And I was actually part of that journey for helping them to have that. And that was when I realised that actually the bit that I really loved was that part. And that was why I then sort of decided, well, actually the bit that I should be doing is actually training and coaching others to be able to navigate life and avoid all of the traps that I fell into and help them to shortcut it effectively or escape it altogether. so that's
amazing.
why. I know that sounds like long-winded, but that's why I ended up doing what I was doing.
That's amazing, because I know a lot of people go through burnout, and I know a lot of people had that awakening moment during the pandemic. And it's great that somebody managed to turn that around and make it something so inspirational. It's great. And can you talk to me a little bit more about your business, your structure, and your company, Metamor for Success? A beautiful name, very creative. And talk to me about it a little bit more. And I want to know, I'm pretty sure there's a 4-stage process that you bring your people through. So can you talk to me about that, please?
Yeah. So part of my coaching business, I've got the Freedom Transformation Formula, which is effectively a 4-stage process for, as I say, it's unlocking that self-doubt, those limiting beliefs, because at the end of the day, we are all limitless. And bringing stress down and energy up and clear pathway for why. Now, that 4-stage process, the first one, reset, and that's effectively resetting where you are in relation to your stress levels, and understanding it, creating awareness, because unless you know what's driving you to feel that way, then you can't make any changes with it. And then in conjunction with that, the second pillar, which is all about re-injecting vitality and energy into your life, because it's great you understand what's causing you stress, but if you haven't got the energy to do anything about it, then you end up spiralling back out of control. You go on repeat again. And for me, it's an absolute vital part, because, your overall well-being is, it's in relation to what we consume inside and out in your bodies. So often we're putting chemicals in our bodies that we don't even realise, and it takes almost 60 seconds for those to go into your body, and that causes things like gut issues, which affect your mind, it affects your gut, your
Story
skin,
of my life.
yeah. So we could talk about that side of it forever.
Yeah.
And then obviously what you're consuming, again, what you're putting into your gut has an impact on you. But it's also learning, as I've mentioned before, is learning the art to just stop, slow down, take time out, learn, about sleeping patterns, your circadian rhythm, all those kind of things. There's so much more to it. But then the third step for me is all about unblocking those limiting beliefs, trying to understand the patterns of your behaviour, what's driving them, where's it come from? Because, no disrespect to with our parenting, our schools, our friends, our colleagues, they will all have an impact in the way in which we think. But we can control that, because just because someone has determined something or said something or given you beliefs, you can unlock those beliefs and do something different. We have a choice to change those.
Absolutely.
And we have a responsibility. Yes, there's people that will get rough deals. We've all had rough deals. My starting point in life wasn't, like I had loads and loads of money. I worked hard for what I got. But I could have said, oh, well, I'm never going to be successful. I'm only going to end up doing, certain roles. It's all my existence is. But ultimately, we can all thrive and succeed. And the fourth pillar, for me, it's the bit that I love even more, and that is about helping people to rediscover what it is that they love, rediscover their why, because we only have one existence. And I want to tap my dragonfly here, because My mantra is, be more dragonfly. And the reason being is because they live every second with purpose, passion, joy. They just make every second count, literally.
Yeah.
And we take it for granted. We take it for granted every single day. We're not present. And that's what's so important, is find something you love and do it with passion.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of, passion and someone finding what they love, do you have an example maybe of somebody who has come to you and they needed that help because they were burned out, they were stressed out, their job wasn't making them happy? And how did you feel? And also, what was the person going through? Like, if you can share maybe an inside experience, what the person was going through and how you managed to help them.
So interestingly, one of the ones that's always been an inspiration to me is a lady called Sammy Engleby, who's actually mentioned quite a bit in the book. And, when you're at the beginning, when you're doing your coaching and training, you need to hone and craft it, make sure that it's right for individuals, because what might be right for me might not necessarily be right for someone else, or they might ask questions that I've not even considered. Anyway, one of my pillars, the stress-free risk resolution, I was doing a 5-day challenge, which she was on. And now Sammy is a founder of a blind company, and amazing woman. But when she first came to me, interestingly, she came under the guises that she wanted to learn strategies for managing stress because she wanted to help her team. What she didn't admit was that actually it was her that was really stressed.
Wow.
And she was working like 70-hour weeks. She was one of these ones that wouldn't be vulnerable with her team or her family and share some of the challenges and problems that she got.
Would you say a bit of a workaholic?
Yeah, but there's a reason for that, and I shall explain why. And the other thing is that because she was an ideas person, I mean, quite often people are, that run founders' companies, they're visionaries. That's what they are. Yeah. Entrepreneurs, they've got ideas galore. I mean, one of the biggest things that I've discovered, I've got so many ideas for businesses, but you've got to learn to go, just stay in your lane for a while because you can do too much. But she wasn't sleeping at night. She wasn't eating healthy food. She was sort of snacking. She'd not been on holiday for a couple of years. She'd not gone out with her husband for like 2.5 years, all of those kind of things. And I remember I was doing these questions with them, just to understand what was driving them to feel the way they was feeling. And I said, think about one scenario that you felt really stressed, maybe, it was 9 out of 10, something like that. It was really high levels. And she was going through the process, and I said, well, what was you doing at the time? Where was you? Who was you with? All of those kind of things. So you're going through, so they'll go through this scenario and they're gradually writing it down, and because you're painting a picture of that situation. And as she was writing something down, you suddenly see her go, when I tell her about the Eureka map, you suddenly see her. She looked up, and she was like, wow. And then she looked down, she carried on writing, and I was like, that's it, she's just got it. And in that one moment in time, she realised that the reason why she was doing a lot of the things that she was doing, there was something that was going on personally, but she didn't want to acknowledge it or talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about what it's about, but it was an extremely personal thing that was going on, but she was hiding from it. And have you ever heard of secondary gain?
No.
So secondary gain is effectively that, quite often people maybe eating a tub of ice cream or drinking loads of alcohol or not sleeping at night. I call it self-soothing because no one deliberately self-sabotages. But you're effectively doing something in avoidance. The 70 hours doing something in avoidance, eating junk food, you're avoiding what you want to actually be doing. So there's always a reason behind it, but it's trying to understand what that thing is going on in the background. And she suddenly recognised what that actual problem was, because she didn't want to have that vulnerable conversation with the person that she loved and talk about it. But she also didn't want to have that vulnerable conversation with her colleagues. And interestingly, the next day, we was doing this obviously online, was on Zoom. There was about 5 of us on the call. And the first day she came in and she's like all dressed up and everything like that. The second day I see her, and where it was on Zoom, she's wearing like the boob tube things.
Yeah.
So, and she's in this boob tube thing, but she's got the camera on. And it looked like she actually had nothing on. Yeah. It was hilarious. I said, you do realise that this is going out publicly, don't you? And she went, oh, no, so I've got my boob tube. And I said, why aren't you working? She went, no, I took the afternoon off. So she hadn't taken any time off, about 2.5 years. She'd taken the afternoon off. She'd had a conversation with the person that she needed to, and she also had a conversation with her team, discussed, certain situations. There was a few tears from her, there was tears from the team. The team shared some of the challenges that they had. So it was the first time they'd actually done this as a team. And some of them was concerned about, the money and finances. She had actually increased their salary, made a decision to do that. She had taken time out in the afternoon, so she'd been sunbathing it in the afternoon, which is why she had this boob tube top on. And then on the weekend, that Saturday, she actually went out on a date with her husband, and they went to Cheshire and walked around the castle walls, and they just took some time out, and they actually booked into the diary once a month after that. But she still says to me now, and this was 2.5 years ago, maybe longer now, and she still messages me going, thank you. And the reason why is because she said, I've locked that emotional monkey away in the cupboard, kept it in check, and she's now focusing a little bit more on logical thinking, taking that step back, time to breathe, think about what it is that she's going to be doing, and then makes a decision to do things rather than coming from an emotional space. And it's just changed her world, and it's saved her from so many things because of the personal thing that's gone on. It's helped her, and now she's actually doing a massive community project, not just like a local community, but for the UK, to help people in association to the problem that she was dealing with.
That is quite a success story.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible.
That's amazing.
And that was even before she'd got to even focusing what her why was. But now she's discovered what her why is as a result of it, because she's taken that time to step back and also include her team, her family. And she's learned that vulnerability is her superpower.
Wow.
So
that's truly amazing what you do. It's great. For those of you who don't know, Keeley was actually starring in our Big Picture seminar with a talk on how to say no. And I'd actually love to hear more about that because I need to say no. And I just want to know, what are very common misconceptions about the ability to say no in corporate settings, and also, what makes a person a people pleaser and how to avoid that, especially, let's put it in a university setting, students and things like that. So can you give any advice?
Oh, yes. As someone that used to say yes to everything, in the corporate environment I was in, it was mainly a male-oriented organisation. It was a manufacturing organisation, so it went without saying that quite often, there was more men there. And I'd been sort of programmed, I went there from 26 years old, and I was pretty much sort of programmed that the only way that I was going to succeed is by emulating a man, saying yes to everything, always trying to prove myself. And the only way I was going to be heard was by saying yes to everything and volunteering. Because I felt that the only way that they would recognise me for anything was by doing that. And this is where the false belief comes into it, because in fact you're doing the opposite. When you're saying yes to everything, you're not only disrespecting yourself, other people start disrespecting you because they're relying on you all the time to do the things, and quite often you're given stuff that's probably not so strategic, and you're not actually going to be standing out for the really good, interesting stuff. You're going to be standing out as a person that was like, you can always rely on her to do it. One of the key reasons for why I was always saying no, as I said, was because of being in that corporate environment and this misconception that the only way I was going to get seen and heard was by saying yes. And the interesting thing is, when you are doing that all the time, that's where people start to disrespect you because you're seen as a yes person. And not in a negative way, it's just that, don't worry, we can always rely on her. I used to have a team of 13 of us, 12 of them were men. And, when there was, a project or an idea or something that needed to be done, it was almost like they'd sit back with her arms crossed, and it's sort of like, well, don't worry, she's going to say yes in a minute, so she can take it on. Now, here's the thing, is that if you're saying yes to everything, you're not only just saying yes for yourself, you're also saying yes for your team. So that means that your team is getting overloaded with activities as well. So they then will get frustrated by you as well, and then they'll get tired and exhausted, they'll get demotivated, because instead of them getting really interesting strategic stuff, which they're good at, they're going to be overloaded with activities that maybe they're not so good at, and then they're going to get frustrated because they're not doing something exciting. And the same goes for yourself. And you're also not seen as a leader when you're saying yes all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's this fear with people that they think that if I don't say yes, then I'm going to be seen as lazy, or I'm going to be judged, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not supportive, or I'm not helpful. Now, I'm not saying that you never say yes, but when you do say yes, you're saying yes, and it's like I said, it's like rather than that emotional monkey and just leaping to something and just saying, oh, yes, I'll do that. Yeah. Even when you can't feel it inside, you know, you have that moment inside, well, why did I even say yes? I'm not going to enjoy it. So when you do it, you make sure you do it for the right reasons. So it's going to benefit not only somebody else, it's also benefiting yourself.
Yeah.
Quite often we're saying yes and it's helping somebody else, and this is where the people pleasing comes into it, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But, you know, saying no is powerful for many reasons, because one, you're showing up more of a leader, because others start respecting you because they know that when you do say yes, you're saying yes to something that is meaningful. Yeah. It's going to be beneficial. It's something that you're going to be good at. You're going to be able to help everybody. It's going to create value for everybody. And you know, when you're learning to say no and put those boundaries in place, you're not only respecting your own boundaries, you're respecting everybody else around you as well. And you're going to be seen as someone that's well, as I say, someone that actually values themselves. And interestingly, that transfers over into your personal life as well, because quite often people think that if I don't say yes, then I'm going to be seen as not very nice, or I'm unkind, or not helpful, or I'm not supportive. And, you know, when you're teaching your children that, if you're saying yes to your children all of the time, or your loved one, or your friend, then you're teaching them that that's okay to disrespect your time and your boundaries and everything like that, which means that they're actually going to do the same with themselves. And this is where the leader shows up in all walks of life, and that's why it's so important, learning the power of saying no.
Yeah, of course.
But there's techniques to do it as well. I mean, I do say. Could
you give us an example of one?
Well, first of all, what
we
I
can
would
act
always
this out
say,
if you like.
Say, one of the things I would say is that obviously no is a sentence. Yeah. And you don't have to justify it, but you can follow it up with, you know, thank you. Or you can say, not just this time, this isn't, you know, I've got other commitments and I need to prioritise those. Or there is the side of it as that, you know, this isn't my strength, and I don't think I'm going to give you the value that you need. However, I do know someone, and you can mention someone's name, that might be able to help you, and I could introduce you, or, you know, somebody else within the company. You can turn around and actually, this quarter, this is where my priorities lie. However, if you need me to be able to drop off something else, if this is critical and you need it done, then what can we drop off, you know, that's not so important? Or, well, I'm not quite sure what my calendar's like right now. I'll go back and check and I'll come back to you. Or thank you for the offer. I really appreciate you considering me in this, but this isn't something that's right for me. You know, there's lots of different techniques that you can do. But ultimately, no is a sentence.
Definitely, So. Absolutely. And you know, I guess this is a bit personal for me, but I've recently started a placement at a marketing team with the Faculty of Business. And obviously, like, this is my first big girl corporate job. And I feel like I do struggle to say no myself, because I feel like imposter syndrome, and also, you know, like, being the type of person that always wants to please everybody else and say yes, I feel like they go hand in hand, because you may not feel good enough with the imposter syndrome, so you want to try and be good enough for everybody else, and that's when you give in to that, always saying yes. So can you talk a bit about your experience? Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? Is that something that you deal with still, maybe?
Yes, I have suffered imposter syndrome. I think, there's a balance of trying to understand, it's reframing what you mean by imposter syndrome. Because one, I don't like to use the word syndrome in association to imposter, because that signifies that it's something that can't be resolved. It's like an illness, and it's not an illness, it's a mindset. And it's about reprogram the way in which you actually see things. So originally I did used to do that, when things used to, when I was asked to do something and it was completely out of my comfort zone, even, it's ridiculous. I got promoted into roles. People said, they came to me, as I said, I didn't get interviewed until my last interview in the last year of my company. And prior to that, people would say, there's this role come up, I think you'd be perfect for it. Would you be interested? So by virtue of the fact they'd come to me must signify that was actually good at what I was doing. You've just been invited to do something. Clearly, they must see something in you, otherwise they wouldn't ask you to do it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's this mindset that we have. So even though I was, an executive, I was a director, program delivery director across, 27 different countries in a group procurement role, big FTSE 100, 27,000 people. And yet, in my mind, I was still sometimes thinking, I'm going to get found out in a minute. How am I even doing this? I felt like a fish out of water, so to speak, sometimes. But as I say, the fact that someone's invited me to do that role said that I was capable of doing it.
It stands for something.
It stands for something. So it's all about reframing the way in which you see things. Have you ever heard of an author, Shad Helmstetter?
Briefly.
Yeah, and I might get this title slightly wrong, but Shad Helmstetter wrote a book, is What to Say When We Speak to Ourselves. And a lot of that is about the negative self-talk we have. And I'm actually a really positive individual. Even before the burnout, I was positive in a lot of things in life. But inadvertently, we say things that are negative to ourselves.
Yeah.
I like, for instance, like knocking over a glass of water or spilling a drink or something like that. You come out with a statement like, oh, I always do that.
Or I'm such an idiot.
Yeah, it was like, I'm such an idiot. Well, the reality is when was the last time you knocked over that glass of water?
It happens.
It happens.
Be kinder to yourself.
Yeah, I did it 10 years ago. Oh, wow, once in 10 years, give me a break. Or as you turn and say, I'm such an idiot. No, you're not an idiot. You've just made a mistake, And it's about reframing those things, and even in a role, when you turn around and say, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm sure there's things that you're learning now because it's a brand new role. And you're always in that learning space, and that's okay. It's okay that you don't know how to do something. But instead of having that belief, oh, I'm not sure I can do that, is reversing that, reframing it and saying, well, okay then, I'm not able to do this right now, but how do I actually help myself to be able to achieve that?
Yeah.
So you go and investigate what you need to do that. It's rather that when someone says, with their why, they might discover that their why is doing, I don't know, one of the chaps that I was working with, his why was he wanted to do property development. He worked in customer services, he had a senior role. And I said, right, okay then. I said, well, what's stopping you? And he went, oh, I can't do it because of this, this, this and this. And I was like, so is that the belief? Or is that the truth? Well, if it's the truth, what do I need to do to be able to discover how to do that differently? And if it's a belief, well, why have you got that belief? What's driving you to think that way?
Yeah.
So, and again, quite often, it's really about trying to find out what I can do instead of. So, he wanted to do it in Italy. That's fine. I said, I've got 5 introductions I can give you that do property market, and one of them does European property market, investment and that. So I introduced them to them. He then had conversations with them to find out what they'd need to do to be able to do that. And then he then went off and studied it. that's the thing. It's finding the knowledge to do it. So it's not that we can't do it. It's, well, how can we do it?
Yeah.
How can we make that happen?
Absolutely.
And that's where you're unlocking the thoughts around imposter syndrome. And another part of that you were saying is that this need to say yes to everything and people pleasing, they're kind of separate. And the reason why I'm saying they're separate, that need to please someone isn't always because you're not convinced that you can do something. Sometimes you'll need to please them. I mean, they say that there's 4 of them. I'm not going to remember all of them, but one of them is this, this difference between being kind and good, that's programmed into us when we're kids, that you've got to be good all of the time, and you've got to be kind all of the time, and all those kind of things, or nice, as I say. I mean, how many times have you seen it with kids? You've got 2 kids that are playing, one of them's minding their own business, playing a game, really, really happy, and the other kid snatches the toy off of them, and they go to snatch it back and then the one that actually snatched it back may get saying, and they're told, oh, don't do that, you're not being very nice, be kind to them, that kind of attitude. And it was like, well, they was actually minding their own business, not doing anything, not causing any harm, and yet you've said that's okay, and they've had to say yes to giving it to that kid. So it's that program belief or subservience, in certain cultures, whether it's religions, society, whatever, where you've got this matriarch sort of environment where the women have to wait hand and foot on someone. And don't get me wrong, that happens in different walks of life, but that mindset, when you're told that you need to do that all of the time, otherwise you're seen as someone that's not respecting the family behaviours.
It can be damaging.
It can be damaging, yeah. So you feel that you've got to do it all the time. I mean, one of my ones was the fear of confrontation. For me, if I said yes all the time and I kept everybody happy, because when everybody's happy, it means everything's good. But if people aren't happy, then people are unpredictable. And when they're unpredictable, then that's when you don't know how they're going to behave. So mine was that protection mode, is protect me, protect my family, protect my loved ones. So that's why I was in that mindset all the time. And that's why it's important to understand where that people pleasing is coming from, so you can then start shifting the mindset of where, your behaviours around it.
Of course. It seems like you make a lot of people's dreams come true, like truly. And also, would you consider yourself as almost like an executive therapist?
Yes, and the reason why that is because a lot of the people that I work with is with executive and leaders. But like myself, there's so many out there. Just because someone's a CEO or they're an executive or a leader, it doesn't mean to say that they don't suffer imposter syndrome, that they don't have self-doubt and limiting beliefs and all those kind of things that's going to stop them elevating in their career. It might be someone that's in like a FTSE sort of 500, where it's a smaller sort of mid-sized business. But each time they get that opportunity to go up the ladder, there's that self-doubt that comes with it. Or indeed, they're doing something that they don't really enjoy. They're good at it. So it's being able to understand where that's coming from.
To wrap things up, Keeley, do you have any last advice for some students who are currently going through their 3rd year or a placement? If they're struggling with any of these, situations where they don't know how to say no, if they're going through situations where they feel like they're not where they're supposed to be at this time, with social media now, there's a lot of anxiety with us students about, us needing to be already millionaires at the age of 21, so how, what advice would you give to students who are trying to deal with these sort of like societal expectations?
Oh, well, there's so many of them. But I think the biggest thing I would say when you're talking about saying no is always ask yourself, first of all, when someone asks you whether you want to do something, take that step back, take that breather, and give yourself time to actually consider, is this something that I really want to do? And why do I want to do it? And make sure that you're giving yourself the time to actually think about it before you rapidly say yes, because sometimes we're compelled to say yes immediately. But just take a step back, take a breather. And in fact, I would invite all of you to do that in anything that you're actually doing, full stop. I recognise that we need to study. Now, I did my master's degree when I was probably 30 something actually, with 2 kids, career, I know what it's like to work hard and do lots of hours study and everything like that. But the biggest thing that I recognise is do take time to stop. Even if it's having a break just for 5 minutes to clear your head, go outside, get some fresh air, have some thinking time, go for a walk, because there's this false belief that you've got to be studying for hours and hours and hours or working hours and hours and hours to succeed. Yeah. If you don't stop and slow down, you're not going to give clarity of mind. You're not going to have clear thinking. Your thought process is not going to be there. So you start becoming overwhelmed. You start becoming more stressed. You start becoming more anxious. You can't sleep at night. Your brain starts going at 1,000 miles an hour. Flip that scenario. First thing when you get out in the morning, do not touch this flaming thing and start reading social media, emails, watching junk on TV. Give yourself time to get up in the morning and have some thinking time. Go in a shower, bath, I don't care what it is that you do, and go outside, get some sunlight, 20, 30 seconds of breathing in the fresh air, sunlight, even if it's dark in the morning, just get some fresh air, which will help your circadian rhythm, and that will help your sleep at night. And when you've got sleep at night, it means that you can think better and have more clarity. Stop, slow down to go fast.
So thank you so much for being here today, Keeley. It was a pleasure to have you, and we will see you next time on the Greenwich Meets Business podcast.
You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts. Subscribe to never miss an episode.